You're listening to Scheduling Sin with me, Snowmilf.
Greetings, listeners. Thank you for tuning in today. We have a very special episode, a two-parter, in fact. Mrs. Snow is feeling better, and together we were joined by Mr. and Mrs. N from the Vanilla to Vixen Podcast. If you haven't heard the show, it's available at all the usual podcast locations, and it's excellent. We highly suggest you give it a listen. We broke this episode into two parts to give you a chance to take a break, but be sure to listen to both. It's worth the time. Huge thanks to Mr. and Mrs. N for taking the time to chat with us. Let's take a listen.
It's lovely to speak to you. So we are Mr. and Mrs. N of the Vanilla to Vixen podcast, and we had our very, very first meet back in 2010.
It was actually for my birthday.
It was.
Happy birthday! I know, that was my birthday.
Yeah, very much so.
it was
Funny, when you're in your 20s, what you want for your birthday is very different as you get older.
Yeah, very true.
it was better than a barbecue. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I just want socks that feel amazing. That's what I want for my birthday.
And we started. We'll begin right from the beginning. That we didn't even want to be swingers. We didn't set out to be swingers. We didn't really know anything about the swinging lifestyle. We were quite unusual in as much as you could count the amount of previous sexual partners we've both had on one hand. So we weren't particularly massively experienced. But we got this relationship. We were a very, very close relationship, and we enjoyed exploring together.
Yeah, we did. I mean, in fairness, when I met Mr. N, I was probably not particularly sexually experienced anyway. And I remember as our relationship was developing, he said to me, you know, have you ever fantasized? And I said, well, no, not really. I'm not quite sure what to do. So we talked about scenarios and things, and we found a scenario that actually I thought to myself, do you know what? That's quite horny. I quite like that. So we used to use that scenario, which would, really get us in the mood and things. And it kind of just progressed from there.
So the scenario was kind of always more MMF, which was male, male, female.
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
So it was like a hot wife dynamic, and that just worked for us.
Who found that? Like, whose idea was that?
That was definitely Mr. N's idea.
I think.
I'm blaming him.
Attaboy.
I mean, it's so funny how much I can relate to all of that.
I've worked in entertainment in the past, and so I kind of like had lots of opportunities to be promiscuous, but never really took them. And so Mrs. N, when we first met, Mrs. N, on our second date, I think it was.
It was our second date.
Actually admitted that she had a health problem. And that health problem was she had damaged nerve endings, which is inside your pussy.
Yes. So it's actually damaged nerve endings of the vulva, is the medical.
To use the medical term, not the sexual.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we got really close on the first day, and when she told me, she said, you know, I don't suppose you will want to see me again, because it means that sometimes I can't have sex.
Yeah.
Oh.
And as far as I was concerned, I just met this fabulous woman who I pretty much was head over heels straight away in love with. And I'm not normally like that. I'm very level-headed, very sensible, but it took me by surprise. And I was just like, well, there are plenty of other things we can do, you know.
Right.
It's not all about, you know, just being robotic and like being like a piston in and out.
Yeah, sure.
There are many other things. And then it made me laugh because it was like really quickly afterwards you went, but I'm great at blowjobs.
She's the one. She's the one. 100%.
I felt I needed to follow it up with a positive.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
We're definitely going over there.
It is cool. And so that was our introduction to each other. And as I say, we weren't sort of vastly experienced with other people. We'd both come out of relationships that neither of them were fun. Neither of them were particularly deeply sexual, and I'd certainly never shared fantasies with my ex. And
oh, good grief, no, never.
So
yeah,
it was almost like we were young teens. I mean, we were sort of like very late 20s, 30s, weren't we, when we met?
Yeah.
And it was something that we grew together. You know, we fantasized together. It was always the MMF thing. And years ago, because we're older than the Ark,
unfortunately, that is true.
There used to be something called Yahoo Chat. Have you heard of Yahoo Chat?
I do remember those.
Yeah.
Yahoo Chat. So,
was that somewhere like AOL?
Yeah, they had chat rooms.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And they had an adult chat room, which wasn't even like...
They were very naughty.
It wasn't even password protected. There was nothing on it.
No, it was the Wild West.
It was just anybody. But so we went on there and we bought ourselves the latest technology, which was probably like a 30 pixel camera webcam. You could just see like a blurred, where you weren't sure if it was a nipple or a cushion. It could have been anything. But we bought ourselves this webcam and we went on Yahoo Chat, and literally, it sounds really tame now, but Mrs. N would literally just flash her tits on this webcam.
I always used to say, don't make me speak to anybody. I can't speak to anybody. I was like really, really shy, which people find hard to believe nowadays, but it is true. I was really shy.
So you must have had, Mrs. N, you must have had like a kink for exhibitionism even back then.
I think, I mean, thinking about it now, yes, I probably did without realising. Because I used to like the whole thing of people watching. It's like if somebody's watching me and they're getting excited, that's actually quite a turn on.
Putting on a show, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I discovered that I got turned on with people watching my wife in a sexual way. Yeah. And that was the very first time I'd ever experienced anything like that. And I was like, holy shit, this is awesome.
We had this experience early on when in one of our first events, our first things that we did, I think Mrs. Snow was kind of blown away by the attention that she got.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know whether you'll agree with this, Mrs. Snow, but to begin with, it takes a while to get used to that, because that doesn't happen in your normal everyday life. So all of a sudden you've got all this attention on you, and I know for myself, I used to doubt it quite a bit and used to say, well, why?
Right.
You know, what is so special that they want to watch me or they want to look at me? I mean, I've got wobbly bits and this, that, and the other.
Oh, right. Oh, no, I get that. And I think it's kind of funny. Like if I were to think about it, not in that context, I would be like, this is insane. Like that's not true. Yeah. And this is all, but in the moment, I feel like I'm a secret megalomaniac.
Not so secret anymore.
No. Yeah. I didn't, but you know, what's so funny is in my life and in my professional life, and just who I am not a selfish person.
Yeah.
I'm a very selfless person. It's just who I am. It's what I do for a living. It's all of the things. And so in some way it's kind of like, this is the area where I don't have to be that way.
Yeah.
And this is the area, and it's kind of fun and it's naughty and it really
it's your alter ego.
Yeah.
And that is the magic. The magic of this lifestyle is that it's an escape and it's an alter ego. You can be anyone that you want to be.
Yeah.
And it's a return to youth, I think, which is probably why people in their sort of late 30s, 40s, why there's so many of that age range in there, is because it gives you an opportunity to go back to your youth, but with all the experience you've got.
Right. Yeah. But in a safe area, like in a safe place with safe people.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it. Because when you're coming up and you're growing up and you're in your 20s and you're experiencing your sexuality in that context, no one knows what the fuck they're doing and everybody's so insecure and you know what I mean?
Oh,
and so
Mrs. Snow asked me just the other day, she said, because I was engaged to a person in my early 20s in college, and she asked me recently, was the sex good before us? And I just laughed and laughed. What I said was, at the time, if you had asked me then, I would have said it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And if you asked me today, I would have said it was boring as shit.
Yeah.
We use a word on our podcast, evolve, and you really do evolve as a person in this lifestyle, whether you be in a couple, whether you be single. You learn about people and you do evolve. So we are definitely not the people that we were even 2 or 3 years ago.
No, absolutely.
Your sexual kinks never stay the same. They evolve as well, and they change. And so the things that you like will change. So sort of going right back to when we were sort of beginning on that 23 pixel camera, we were never ever going to meet anyone. That freaked us out. But it was just originally Cammy. 3 years down the line, we chatted to this one guy that we liked. And he was in the British Armed Forces, which, of course, a man in uniform.
Oh, there you go.
Hard to resist.
And he was such a lovely guy. And we chatted to him. It was, I think, during, I don't know if Afghanistan or one of the conflicts. So this poor guy was on his own out there. And he really looked forward. It wasn't just about the sex with him. We chatted, and really got to know him. And it was just like three friends chatting. But then one minute he'd kind of be wanking over Mrs. N. That's a very British term. Yeah. Jacking off. He'd be jacking off over Mrs. N. And then afterwards, we'd just all sit and chat like friends. So that was our very first experience of it suddenly being a kind of like a sexual thing, and then reverting back to just being friends, which is very much what the lifestyle is. And so it went from that. And then one day he knew we'd shared all sorts of information, and this was 3 years later. And he actually said to us, I'm literally passing your village. He knew where we lived roughly. He said he lived on one side of the country, we lived on the other. So the chance of meeting was never, ever going to happen. But he actually said to us, I'm going to be passing your house. Would you like to meet? And that was one of the biggest moments of our lives. We just looked at each other, and there was just this like look of terror in each other's eyes. Because at that, you don't know. You don't know whether it's going to fuck your marriage up.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And we got a great relationship. There was no chink. There was nothing. We were very, very close, and we didn't know how this was going to affect it. And so we agreed that what we would do is just do a little bit of sexual play, but not go all the way. So we agreed on Mrs. M was going to give a blowjob.
I was.
Because you're good at them, so that makes sense.
That's it. She wanted to show off her talent.
Yeah,
we want to highlight that part.
Yeah, we do.
That's it. And he came, and bless him, this was his first rodeo. So he literally came to the door, this big, strong military guy, and he was shaking like a leaf, wasn't it?
Well, in fairness, I think we all were, weren't we? It was.
Mrs. N was in our lounge. We got the house to ourselves, and Mrs. N was in the lounge in a big dressing gown and sexy red underwear.
Yes.
Underneath.
Wow.
And he came in, and he was terrified. And we instantly got on because of his vulnerability, which, again, is something we talk about in the podcast. Mm-hmm. The more open and vulnerable you are, the more actually people will warm to you. And he was. There was no arrogance. There was no bravado. But we were aware of, how strong this guy could be, obviously, because of his job. But he was like a little pussycat. In our front lounge, and we just chatted, and then it kind of turned sexual. And I said, one of my big things is actually like listening not necessarily seeing what's going on. So I almost kind of did it deliberately. I said, would you mind if we took a few photos, which we'd already discussed, hadn't we, actually?
Yeah.
And so I said, I'm just going to go and get my camera. And it was the longest journey up our stairs I've ever made because I went really slowly because I wanted to just walk in and kind of see the action as I walked in.
Yeah. I did the exact same thing just a few weeks ago with Mrs. Snow.
Yeah,
it's so funny.
I went downstairs to get some waters for everybody,
quote unquote,
and I stood at the bottom of the stairs for much longer than I needed to.
It's the ultimate. It is the ultimate. And so I came downstairs, and you, Mrs. N, was actually. You were in the middle of it, weren't you?
I didn't actually realise you'd come back downstairs, to be honest. I was slightly distracted.
She's so focused.
And so that was like, many, many years ago. And it still is in my mental hard drive as vivid.
It is, considering it was such a long time ago. And I remember so clearly thinking to myself, why am I enjoying this so much? Surely I shouldn't be enjoying it so much, but I really am enjoying it this much.
Because there's no guilt. You've got no guilt. You've got no, you're actually living out the fantasy but there's no guilt there. So
it's funny how, you talk, like we talked about this similarly to you. We talked about this and we fantasized about it. Yeah. And I used to always say, fantasy and reality are different.
Yeah.
Right. Like and I think that was really kind of before we kind of got into this, it was very much like we could talk about it all day long, but like, I don't really know, because similar, you said that there's that risk to your marriage. Like, we have an incredibly strong relationship. We've been together forever. Yeah. We're best, we're best friends. We're all of these things. And the idea of potentially putting that at risk was not something that I was super eager to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We were very much the same. And when we did, I remember we was talking about it afterwards and saying that could have gone horribly, horribly wrong.
Yeah.
And it was one of the biggest risks we've probably ever taken.
To any of your listeners, we can't emphasize enough the importance of your first time picking who you're going to be playing with.
Yeah.
So our first meet was the best thing that could ever happen. So Mrs. N was then on the floor, and I think you were just both naked by that time, and I could see Mrs. N wanted it. I could see it. I literally could see it. She was biting her lip very sexually, but kind of withholding it. And so it was me that took the step and just went, do you want to fuck her? And he was like, he was really nice, wasn't he? And he was just like, no, because we agreed to boundaries. But Mrs. N was like frantically going, no, yes. Let's renegotiate.
Well, when you asked that question, were you worried what Mrs. N might say?
No, not at all.
I think that's the thing, because of the type of relationship we have. And at that point, we'd been together 5 years, hadn't we?
6 years.
5 or 6 years. We knew each other so well.
And we'd talked about this, and I will sort of go on to how right it can feel and how wrong it can feel. And that all depends on the third person or third and fourth people if you're a couple. Yeah. So with this guy, I didn't feel threatened. He was a really good looking guy, and we found out he was an officer. Yeah. Probably not an officer and a gentleman.
An officer and a scoundrel. Yeah.
This is it.
The best kind.
And so, but he was not threatening to me, and
he was very respectful, and it was very much that he included Mr. N the whole time.
He made it about me, which was really important, especially if you're in a hot wife scenario, that although the male isn't directly probably involved in the sex, you can still make them a part of it.
Very much so.
Yeah. And so he was just wonderful. So no, there wasn't one tiny bit of me that was worried that they would say yes. I was probably worried that they would say no and feel awkward. Then it was just the most wonderful meet, but we could never meet him again because of geography and logistics of it. And so then we move on Second meet, we got catfished, where the guy was a lot older than he said he was.
Oh,
by the way, we lived off of that first meet for six. It was 6.
Was it 6 years?
6 years. We didn't have another meet.
Oh wow!
And I also would like to say that we actually still chat to him.
Oh, that's awesome.
All this time later, so 13 years later.
I've only ever met him once, but we still chat.
We still have like naughty messages to each other and have a giggle.
And the second meet, we only decided kind of go through another meet with somebody else many years later, because we knew it was just never, we kind of wished it would happen again with him, but we kind of then came to realize it was never ever going to happen.
Yeah.
And so we kind of like wanted to repeat that euphoria, because
I think we're looking at to have, again, like I said, Mr. N said about me, I was like, I didn't want to sleep with lots of people. It was just this one person that we were going to have this kind of sexual relationship with.
I mean, I remember that the morning after we'd done it, we went shopping and we literally floated down the aisles.
We were like teeny.
We had some of that after our first.
Yeah. It's almost like losing your virginity for the first time again.
It is.
We got home and it was kind of like
way better.
Yeah.
Way better though.
Can you believe we just did that?
Yeah.
Did when we were in the supermarket and we were going, I wonder how many other people have had a threesome.
Do they know?
Yeah.
Can they see like the scarlet T on our?
Have I got it written all over my face?
Right. Oh yeah.
In our first case, it was a lot of our first experience was similar to yours in that we lucked out. I think in the way that sometimes people do, that the person that we chose as our first person was excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was wonderful.
Very respectful. Vulnerable, like you've talked about. I mean, it was perfect. And the sex was very good.
I mean, that was
very
enjoyable.
very good.
I can't say it wasn't.
and the thing about that there was some insecurity, I think, on my part afterwards, partly because he was physically bigger than me in every way.
Yeah.
And so there was I never thought like, oh my gosh, she's going to leave me. But there was an element of she loved it.
Yeah.
Like loved it. And at the same time, I was equal parts thrilled for her to have had that experience, and also a little self-conscious, thinking, I can't do the same thing that he just did, just physically.
Yeah.
Just not able to.
Yeah.
And that was something that I didn't expect.
Okay.
I didn't expect those feelings afterwards, but within a few days, I think I came around to the idea that I was just so happy that she had had a great time, and I had a great time too. It was a really good experience all around, and we still talk to him.
See, I remember, obviously after our first meet, that was the first time I could honestly differentiate between sex and, making love with somebody.
Yeah.
Because
we were in a very similar circumstance, because he was a lot bigger than me.
Yeah, he was.
Wow, that came quick.
No hesitation there whatsoever.
Yeah, I was going to say, wow, I'm sorry, buddy. I get it.
But he got off, but I really got off on it.
But do you know what I liked about it? And this has kind of been carried through our whole journey, is I've always said to Mr. N, I don't want somebody that is the same as you. I don't need that, because I have that with you. So I always look for something different. And it's not because
that makes sense.
It's not because I want something different. It's going to be really difficult to explain. But I don't want to feel like I do when I'm with Mr. N. I want it to just be, it is just about sex, but I want that different experience.
Well, sure. And that's the wonderful thing about this, the naughty hobby, the lifestyle, from my perspective. And it goes back to when Mrs. Snow asked me about sex with my ex.
Yeah.
It's this experience engages you mentally. It engages your limits. It engages all sorts of new things. It's not just sex for the purpose of rubbing pieces together and getting off.
Yeah,
exactly.
So true.
It engages so much of the rest of yourself watching your wife with another person it's going to be something for you. It might be good, it might be bad, but it's going to engage a part of you that you've never played with before until you've done it. And that's true with so much of this.
Yeah. I think you always remember whenever you go to a club or you go to a meet, at the end of the day, you're going to be leaving with your partner. So whatever you do, you have to be a little bit selfish in as much as it is about you as a couple. So that doesn't mean that you can be selfish in the bedroom. You always obviously want to make sure the other person's having a good time. But the most important thing is that you two have a good time.
Yeah.
Because that's your relationship.
I mean, we've always said, haven't we? It's for me, when we play with another gentleman, for me, it feels like it's the ultimate way of showing Mr. N how much I love him, which I know a lot of people would not understand that. But, and he's always said to me, well, it's not, I don't want it to be just about me. It's about you as well. And I said, no, but you don't understand the feeling I get from what we do and how it makes me feel more about you is the reason I like doing it.
Right. I 100% get what you're saying. Yeah. Like, I definitely get something out of it. It's not like an all or nothing thing.
No, not at all.
I enjoy it, and I love knowing how much you enjoy it.
And one of the things she said very early on when we're sitting at a bar and we had not played yet. We were really kind of just flirting with the idea of actually doing it. She looked up at me with this devilish smile and she said to me, I'm a little afraid to have you watch me enjoy it.
Yeah, I understand that.
I will never forget that moment. Yeah. Like, it still gives me goosebumps. And I look back at her and I'm like, you don't understand. That's
I mean, I think Miss Glenn and I had the same conversation, really, because with the whole thing with me biting my lip, didn't really want to show him how much I was enjoying it because I didn't want him to be upset or hurt by that. Right. So you do kind of try and hide it a little bit.
But I was so relaxed that and with what we were doing, oh geez, it had the opposite effect in as much as I was gone. And that's why I said, would you like to progress? But then kind of moving on from that to skip past our second meet, it wasn't very good at all.
It was a disaster.
He catfished us and he was a lot older. But then we go on to our third meet, which was a complete disaster. And I would say emotionally painful for both of us.
Yeah.
So this was a guy that was very experienced and he made all the right noises. And we couldn't emulate what we'd had before. So that's what we were trying to do, which was a mistake because we were never going to do that. But we tried with this guy and we met him and he was a very confident guy, wasn't he?
Incredibly confident.
And again, we tried emulating what we'd done before. We got to really know him. We knew where he worked. We knew his office. He gave us his office phone number. And we knew him really quite well to talk to. Or we knew sort of about his personal life quite well. And we found it very difficult because we couldn't get the house to ourselves. We got kids at the time, and we did something really, really stupid. We were like texting one night, and then Mrs. N was just like, we were all really horny, and we said, well, Mrs. N, why don't you kind of just go out with him in the car? And so we did. Mrs. N went out, and I think you Skyped me, didn't you, Mrs. N?
I did Skype you.
And they were like full fucking and everything. And it was the horniest thing that I'd ever seen. It was the first time that this had happened when I wasn't there. Yeah. We loved that. We agreed then we had a chance to have the house to ourselves a week later. And we all met up. And he was the most rude, arrogant person when I was there that you could imagine. And so you talk about then feeling vulnerable because this guy's a very experienced guy in the lifestyle. He knew all about rope play and bondage and everything else. now, talking to me now, someone who's done a podcast for a year and, hosted events. So now I would call myself very experienced. I realized that he was arrogant, but anybody that truly understands the lifestyle would never have acted how he acted.
Yeah.
Right.
So he humiliated me. And even if you're in a cuckold relationship, because obviously, as you probably know, there's a difference between cuckold and, stag and vixen or hot wife. But even if you're meeting a cuckold couple, is it for any of your male listeners out there, you always ask what the fetish is, what the kink is. You always make sure with a couple that you don't just go in there and humiliate the husband. You talk and respect them first. Because cuckold is just play. It's just a scenario. But he didn't. He acted the man.
Mm.
Well, many men forget that they're playing a role for both partners.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah.
And we find that frequently because like you guys, we are attracted to single males, but most single males that we talk to really don't understand that whether they're physically or not, they're playing with both partners.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they don't understand that it's sort of like a get out of my way, let me fuck your wife mentality.
Yeah.
Well, they'll send them messages. Hey, can I fuck your wife?
Yeah.
First message, number one, not like, hey, how you doing?
Straight
there's no like, boy, it's rainy outside. None of that. Nope. It's just, can I fuck your wife? And I'm always blown away by this. As many times as it's happened. What am I supposed? Yeah, come on over. Like, what? What are you talking about?
It happens a lot.
It is. It's, and I mean, I think the whole scene in the UK is now moving towards clubs. So over here, I don't know what it's like in the States because I've never sort of been.
Well, you have a place to stay if you do.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's awesome.
Mrs. N actually has family in America.
I do have family in America, so I have been lucky enough to visit.
But that's cool. But so over in the UK, we literally have Fab Swingers that everybody is on and everybody uses the website. And that's pretty much it. It's Fab Swingers and clubs. And we've noticed that the scene, I think because females are getting so sick of that let me fuck your wife mentality. Yeah. And it's even worse for the single ladies. Yeah. That it's just slowly moving towards clubs now because it's a completely safe environment. It's as crazy as it is, and I'm sure you know this because you've been to clubs, it's less pressure. So if you meet somebody at your house or in a hotel, there's just you and them. And
there's an expectation.
Yeah, exactly.
There's an expectation, and even if you agree to do nothing, it's very awkward to get out that scene. Whereas at a club, you can just drift away and go and buy a drink and just move on, kind of thing. So there's a lot less pressure at a club. A lot less pressure. Yeah,
that makes sense. The problem that we've had in the club is, and this is probably just the club that we've gone to, but it. Particularly in their dance floor area, it is so loud that it's hard to have real conversations with people. I mean, you're kind of yelling over the music, like, where are you from? Where are you from? How big's your penis?
How big's your dick? You like
What? Did you say 8? You guys have talked about, and I didn't really consider this before you mentioned it, is that you guys use a Discord server and talk some and get to know each other a little bit online before you get to the club.
Yeah.
But the question I have on that is, how do you share the information about that Discord server in a way that it just doesn't become immediately populated with the trolls from Fab Swingers or other places.
We have a guy.
we have a guy. He's the guy.
Yeah,
it's Eddie.
We have an online bouncer.
He's called Mr. Horny.
He is.
And so you've got to bear in mind that our scenario over here is quite unique, because, as I say, it all happened by accident. So we wrote the book of what happened to us over our first meets and everything, and then at the end of it, I'm like, we're actually quite proud of this, aren't we? This book that we created together.
Yeah.
And because of the nature of the book, we weren't sure what to do with it. We'd never written anything before. And so we sent it to a publisher, and the publisher was actually interested, but then sent back this deal. I think they spotted that we were like green behind the ears and just tried ripping us off with this really crap deal. And so we were just like, well, we would just try publishing it ourselves and just sit. And honestly, it was just like the podcast. We thought we'd sell 3 copies of this book. And we put it on Amazon, and then we were like, okay, how can we advertise it? Because it's sex, and you can't advertise adult sex things very easily. So we tried, we listened to another podcast, which was a British podcast, and we tried writing to them, and they were quite rude back to us. They were quite abrupt. And so bear in mind, because of the nature of the industry I worked in, I got a recording studio sitting in the back of our house. So Mrs. N was just like, look, we've got all the kit there. Why don't we do our own podcast? Then we can advertise the book on it. And it wasn't about making money. It was about sharing our journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was always what it was about.
We chatted quite a lot to people on Fab. And we've always, and the one thing I'm quite proud of, we've always been very open and honest about our journey.
Very, very much so.
Yeah. And we'd had people reply back, especially if I'd spoken about my medical issue and things, and people said, oh, you've helped me so much. And, I it's like, I can't thank you enough. You've helped our marriage. And this was kept going on over quite a few years. So when I said to Mr. N about doing the podcast, I said, I want it to be that place where hopefully we can help people, but get out there more.
There was a couple of programs on television as well over in the UK. Bear in mind, we only have about 10 channels over here. It's shit. We've only just worked out how to work electricity and... So there's been a couple of programs about swinging. One of them is actually Liberty Elite is featured on, but it's not a typical club night, because as you can imagine, when the TV cameras walked in, members, it was all prearranged, and normal members, including ourselves, would not have wanted to have gone on television at that stage. And so I don't think it typically represents how good the club is on a normal night. So we with that in mind, we had no sort of idea how to promote the book. And so we did this podcast, and the final straw was the fact that there was a couple of TV programs that were just dreadful, and they promoted the lifestyle as something it wasn't.
Yeah.
As seedy, as wife swapping. And there's far more to it than that. And so we wanted to portray it more, the feelings and the emotions of how you really feel when you try doing it. And that's what our podcast is.
That's how it all started. Basically, because somebody just pissed me off.
Isn't that how the greatest ideas usually happen?
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
We're going to take a break there, but don't forget to tune in to part 2, available now.
We want to hear from you, so email us at snowmilf@yahoo.com. That's snowmilf, SNOMILF @yahoo.com. You can also check out our sexy videos on Pornhub, also under Snowmilf. SNOMILF. Enjoy.